afternoon and welcome to day 2 of the North Dakota Department of Health Tobacco Prevention and Control Program ENDS Summit 3.0. My name is Neil Sharvat. I'm the director of the Tobacco Prevention and Control Program with the department. North Dakota, like every state, is concerned about the continued issues with electronic nicotine delivery system, or ENDS. The ENDS Summit has been a tool that our program and partners utilize to share information and discuss the continued issues surrounding ENDS products and their societal impacts. Our partners include Tobacco Free North Dakota, local public health units, service providers, state agencies, and others. We strive to continue to provide timely information relating to ENDS. Summit Day 2 will involve discussions about ENDS products and what they contain, legal issues around ENDS, and word from our state coalition, Tobacco Free North Dakota. Before we start, I want to take a moment to thank the Department of Health Tobacco Prevention and Control Program staff, Kara Backer, Kara Hickel, and Abby Erickson for their time and talents to put these summits together. Housekeeping item to note, we have a full schedule again today. If you have any questions, please use the team's Q&A function. We will try to get to as many questions as time allows for our guests. Any questions we can't get to will be sent out to our presenters for response, which we will share. In North Dakota, we have a good fortune to be able to provide support for and gain knowledge from our first speakers. Their efforts to deal with the national ENDS problem help focus on local North Dakota issues. Their work enables us to justify our focus on ENDS products and show that this isn't a problem for them outside of North Dakota, but is truly an us problem. Kolby Schaeffer Fraase is an assistant professor of practice within the School of Nursing at North Dakota State University. Earning her doctorate of nursing practice in 2019, Schaeffer Fraase began as a new co-investigator in 2020 on a well-established NDSU tobacco prevention and control research team. Her research includes the analysis of e-liquid labels with a focus on e-liquid marketing, warning labeling, ingredient listings, and other components. Schaeffer Fraase's research also include assisting in the interpretation of chemical analysis of e-liquids, tobacco specialty shop environments, and related aspects. Directly after her will be Dr. Kelly Buettner-Schmidt, who is a professor of nursing at North Dakota State University. Her bachelor and master of science degrees in nursing from University of North Dakota and her PhD from the University of New Mexico in nursing and health policy. Kelly has 35 years of experience in public health, with 28 years in tobacco prevention and control. She has conducted numerous tobacco control research studies, most recently on vape shops and e-liquids. Kelly also led or contributed to the advocacy efforts resulting in numerous tobacco control ordinances, including passage of North Dakota's first local smoke-free ordinance in 2000, and a passage of North Dakota's statewide smoke-free law, along with other statewide laws. Kelly's work is cited in the 2016 U.S. Surgeon General report, E-cigarettes use among youth and young adults, and in other peer-reviewed publications. She has presented nationally and internationally. She is the proud mom of 3 adult daughters and 2 son-in-laws, although Kelly is not a grandma yet. Welcome to Kolby and Kelly.
Thank you very much, Neil, and thanks everyone for coming to the presentation. And we're very honored to be here. And Kolby and I are in different locations, so we're going to be tag teaming the presentation a little bit. So please be patient with us as we do that. So next slide, please, Kolby. We first want to say that we have no disclosures or conflicts to declare. Next. So I'd like to begin by placing tobacco epidemic in the context of our current COVID epidemic. Over 2 years, more than 5.5 million people have died from COVID globally. This equals about 2.3 million people per year. If you'll click, Kolby, thank you. Tobacco use kills more than 8 million people per year. I am not making light of the deaths from COVID. They are horrible, tragic, and needless deaths impacting far too many people. The point is tobacco also kills far too many people, and these deaths deaths also are needless and preventable. Another important difference is that there is an entire industry working to keep tobacco use rates high and countering public health efforts to decrease the impact of this epidemic. When I first began in tobacco prevention and control, I attended a presentation where a man was discussing how he lost his wife to tobacco use. He told all of us in the audience at that time that we were heroes, that we wore the white hats. And I say to you that you are now wearing the white hats and are the heroes in fighting this epidemic. So a little bit of an overview of our presentation. So first we'll do a brief review of the 2019 study methods because they contribute to this presentation. Then a little bit of review of e-liquids, and then we will describe the current focus of our analysis from the 2019 study and some preliminary results, including general label analysis, thematic analysis, flavor wheel, and a chemical analysis, and then just a brief one-slide summary. Next slide. Some of you may recall that for our 2019 study, we purchased e-liquids across North Dakota. We have analyzed and presented some of those results of that study at last year's ENDS conference. Since that summit, we have successfully disseminated those results in peer-reviewed publication. And as planned, we are now continuing the analysis of these e-liquids and are able to present some of the preliminary results to you. Next. I want to share with you members of our research team. These people are currently working on this particular analysis that we're sharing today. Dr. Schaeffer Fraase, who you will hear from in just a bit, Dr. Millers and Dr. Orr. We also have very part-time research assistants with Lizzie and Michaela, and I want to specifically recognize Michaela for her work in putting together this presentation. We also have a couple other research team members, Brady Mack, who many of you probably know. He's currently not active on this study, but we are collaborating with him on pharmacy efforts at increasing tobacco cessation counseling to patients. We also are collaborating on this study with Dr. Machi Ganowitz, who is professor of oncology at Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center in Buffalo, New York, and with Catherine Stewart, who is a doctor of chemistry from Montana State University. Next. Today we are going to focus and discuss the identification and categorization of e-liquids, including flavors and other organic substances, and the labeling of such. And you can see the listing of things that we have analyzed and reported on previously. Next. A little bit about the methods of the 2019 study. To identify the shops, we used 3 methods. That included identifying specific shops off of the North Dakota Attorney General's office, communicating with the tobacco prevention coordinators at the local public health units who provided shop names. We also conducted an internet search based on published protocols on doing that in a reliable method. Next. You may recall that we focused on purchasing e-liquids from vape shops and vape kiosks, head shops, tobacco shops, and other shops. And you can see the list of those that we excluded from this particular study. We did identify 38 shops meeting the study's inclusion criteria, and we were able to collect shop samples from 35 shops, which is a 92% completion rate, which is a really high completion rate in research studies. Next, we want to show you, you might be familiar with some of these types of shops, but perhaps not. So we want to show you, this is a vape shop, and you can see on the wall the rows of bottles and flavorings of the e-liquids. The devices that this shop sold are in the case. Next. This is a vape kiosk, and as you may know, kiosks are small shops that are frequently placed in mall walkways. This is a head shop. Thank you, Kolby. This is a head shop, and you can see in the lower right-hand corner that we added a red box to help you see where the e-liquids and related products are placed. Next. And this is a tobacco shop. And again, we placed a red box where the e-liquids and related items are located in this type of shop. Next. So we purchased the e-liquids in early 2019, and we sent the e-liquids for chemical analysis to determine the ingredients to Montana State University, as NDSU did not have the capability to do this analysis in this 2019 study. NDSU could do the analysis in 2015, but things shifted, and so we relied on Montana State University in 2019. Next slide. And I want to be sure to thank people who are hopefully in the audience today and who helped us with that 2019 data collection. So thank you to Bobby, Chelsea, and Jennifer. Their assistance really was invaluable. Next. Just a brief review of e-liquids. E-liquids are also known by the other names listed here. And you please want to be aware that public health does not use the term juice, e-juice, as this implies something healthy, which we know e-liquids are not. Sometimes we have to use that term in communicating with the public or in doing surveys, but when I'm presenting and when we're talking about it to professionals, we try not to perpetuate the word juice. Most e-liquids come in bottles like these, and they're used to fill the electronic cigarettes. We did purchase some e-liquids that came in really unique packaging, and Kolby will be showing some of those a bit later. And we purchased some compounded in shop e-liquids that I will describe also in a minute. Next. So typically in e-liquids, they are a mixture of water, food grade flavoring, a choice of nicotine levels, propylene glycol, and vegetable glycerin. Some contain cannabis. The PG and VG are humectants used in e-liquids to produce the aerosols that simulate smoke, and the ratio of this PG and VG can be changed based upon whether flavor or plume or the smoke is more desired. You can see in the red box, and part of our study is that many more ingredients are not disclosed. Next. As many of you know, newer to the market are what are called nicotine salts. Nicotine salts have lower pH than the free-base nicotine, which is something that we are more familiar with and are in cigarettes and are in some e-liquids. The nicotine salts allow higher levels of nicotine to be inhaled more easily and with less irritation to the throat than free-base nicotines. So for this study, we did purchase nicotine salt, free-base e-liquids, and also e-liquids that contained no nicotine or nicotine-free e-liquids. Next. So we purchased a total of 285 samples, and we included all of those samples for some of our analysis. For the chemical analysis, due to cost, we needed to limit some of the number of samples and did so by random sampling. We also included for chemical analysis all the samples that were compounded in shop and all the samples that we considered having unique packaging. Next. Compounded in shop, we considered e-liquids as compounded in shop when they were either mixed in the shop or when extra nicotine was added to the e-liquid in the shop. Use of this term, compounded in shop, came about because our pharmacists on this study kept commenting how these shops were basically mixing chemicals and mixing items, which is what pharmacists do when they compound drugs. And the pharmacists also were alarmed that they were mixing nicotine without any type of licensure or oversight. And so as we came around to discuss this many times, we decided to use the term compounded in shop. Of course, we know that these shops do not have anywhere near the regulation, almost no regulation versus pharmacies that are highly regulated. This slide shows the shops in our samples that compounded in shop. If you remember, we had a total of 35 shops. None of the head shops or the other shops compounded in shop, so they're not included on this slide. However, in North Dakota, we had 3 shops that allowed staff to make e-liquids on site. 2 were vape shops and 1 was the tobacco shop. 1 shop allowed customers or staff to mix the e-liquids to make new flavors on site, and 6 shops allowed staff to add extra nicotine to the e-liquids. All 6 of these were vape shops. Next slide, please. Well, periodically, we've inserted just a little nature slide to give your eyes just a little bit of visual relief. And so next, Kolby is going to present some of the preliminary results. And she has to advance her own slides. So
yes. All right, thank you, Kelly. The research team is now focusing on 4 main areas, as we've previously introduced. So our general label analysis, a thematic analysis, application of a flavor wheel, and chemical analysis. And the following slides will discuss each type of analysis that is currently in progress. We will briefly cover the background, methods, and preliminary findings for each. So we will first begin by discussing the general label analysis. So how did we get here? Last year, we presented on our 2019 study, which evaluated nicotine content accuracy, child resistance packaging, retail environments, and point of sale characteristics. There was also an evaluation of compliance with North Dakota statewide smoke-free law and other labeling issues. The 2015 study inspired more focus in 2019 to further investigate flavor agents and other substances in e-liquids, as well as to dive deeper into what information or lack thereof was seen on e-liquid labels. And so that's what we're doing now, is the continuation of what the 2019 findings kind of inspired us to look at. So our methods for the general label analysis, we had the following categories that we coded for statistical analysis. We evaluated labels to identify commonalities in labeling practices and to also explore for potential trends in the data based on shop type as well as e-liquid type. So looking at the free base salts and 0 milligram or nicotine-free samples. So our brief overview of these preliminary findings. Some notable information present on product labels include the term premium, which is a marketing term to imply a higher quality that currently has no standard to measure against. So it's just kind of a marketing tactic. Some products were hand marked to indicate nicotine content. Some listed minor or legal age of use phrases. And some samples included things like expiration dates, a Prop 65 warning, and we know the Proposition 65 requires businesses to provide warnings to Californians about significant exposures to chemicals that cause cancer, birth defects, or other reproductive harm. So this is something only required in the state or if it's being sold in the state of California, but we still found some products that included this warning. We evaluated for some FDA comments. So for example, if it says this product is not FDA approved. Some products also included cessation information. So for example, this product is not intended for cessation. And some products also included things about children and pet warnings. So for example, keep out of reach of children and pets, or keep out of reach of children and or pets. Other examples of inconsistencies include if and what ingredients were listed. So some of them would list natural or artificial flavorings, if they were food grade, if they were kosher, just for a few examples. Others included manufacturer information. So some were clearly labeled, made in the USA, but others listed a manufacturer without a known location, and some samples didn't clearly list a manufacturer at all. We also noted samples that included medical and poison control warnings, and I will show some examples of this on our next slide, as well as some extra or unique label findings. So we'll go ahead and take a look at some photos now. So this first picture we see, what we've underlined is a warning. So this product is intended for, a unique piece of information. So this product is intended for committed smokers of legal smoking age. So we thought that that was a fairly unique finding because it's talking about committed smokers that are of legal smoking age. But what we don't see on this label is any poison or medical warnings, but it does also highlight to us there toward the bottom that it should not be consumed. So it says do not drink. The second photo that we see here is the example of the Prop 65 warning that I previously discussed, but it also states, if nicotine poisoning occurs, seek immediate medical attention and call poison control. So again, this label is very different from the first photo that we looked at. The third photo really doesn't have a lot of words, but does contain symbols. So this sample has no written warnings, but includes the symbols you see that are highlighted with that red line there. But no descriptions are included to explain what these symbols mean. So therefore, it is up to the consumer to interpret what these symbols mean to them. And then the last photo you see here, we see a lot of conflicting information. So up at the top, we see, this must be of legal smoking age. As we move down further, we see a nice collection of symbols again, without any explanation as to what these symbols mean. We see an 18 plus and a 21 plus. So we don't know what the legal smoking age is. And then again, toward the bottom, it says you must be 18 years old or of legal smoking age in your jurisdiction. So not only are we seeing conflicting information on labels, between different samples, in one sample alone, we noted that there was multiple conflicting pieces of information. So lots of inconsistencies are being noted. So now we will move into our thematic analysis. We know that some e-liquid packaging is unique with bright colors and interesting names. The research team is working on categorizing the e-liquid sample labels by theme and design as well as product name. So how did we get here? In 2019, the research team identified 8 products that were uniquely packaged, and those are the samples you see here on this slide. They often had outer packaging that resembles everyday items, and this type of packaging may be appealing to youth, such as the coffee cup, the pop can, or spray paint cans. These were samples that did not come in containers resembling small bottles or did not have standard rectangular packaging. And this packaging and container design could allow youth to hide the products from their parents or other adults. So we wanted to explore this further. We conducted a literature review that did not locate any published label analyses that focused on themes. However, we identified 5 primary articles that allowed us to develop a comprehensive thematic analysis. And so I'll tell you a little bit about each of these. So the first one we see is the Content Appealing to Youth Index. And so the CAY is a tool created to assess youth appealing content in alcohol advertisements. And it can also standardize the assessment of character appeals, youth-oriented genres, product and review appeals, and risk-related content. And so even though it evaluated alcohol advertisements, there were 2 authors that you see next in line that utilized the Content Appealing to Youth Index when evaluating electronic cigarette video advertisements. So the second source you see there. And then the third one used the Content Appealing to Youth Index for a content analysis of marketing e-liquids and ENDS devices and its use on social media. So looking at social media posting. So those were 3 that we utilized to build our evaluation for our thematic analysis. The fourth one you see evaluated cartoon images on e-juice labels. And so the authors of this article used information from the 1998 Master Settlement Agreement's ban of cartoon images in the advertisement of tobacco products, including product packaging or labeling. So based on the Master Settlement Agreement's definition of a cartoon, these authors generated 5 categories of cartoon descriptions that they used to evaluate images on e-juice labels, which we found, this was very applicable to what we were looking for with our comprehensive analysis. Lastly, we found an article about youth perceptions of cigarette packaging, and although this only focused on standard tobacco cigarettes, the packaging evaluation was quite interesting. So in this article, youth were surveyed regarding their tendencies toward purchasing cigarettes, and what these authors found is that the youth perceived that plain packs were rated as uncool, not popular, and boring. And so we felt that it would be interesting for us to standardize an evaluation of overall packaging of these e-liquid labels. To kind of help round out our thematic analysis. So a brief overview of our preliminary findings. So again, we're looking at that overall packaging. So is it plain? Is it colorful? Our overall theme and total number of themes, because as I show you some pictures here in the next couple of slides, you'll note that there's some labels that could fit within multiple themes that we've generated from the literature. We'll also be evaluating for cartoons, like we discussed from the definitions from the Master Settlement Agreement. Looking for any food products, because that was also included in one of the articles. And then we're also evaluating for look-alike products, and I'll also discuss that here in a few slides. So here are some examples of product labels from each of the following thematic categories. So here is one example of what would be considered cute by definition. Here is one that is edgy or cool. Vintage or historical, so you'll see that's old school chess pieces and the label looks kind of distressed and antique. There are some that are mature or sexual in nature. Fantasy, so this one has aliens. Health related, this one is called Skinny Vape. Intense or demonic, this brand is called Hell's Vapors. Or referencing drug use, and so the name of this product is the flavor is PCP. As previously mentioned, we will again be looking at the total number of themes for each sample. Therefore, what we see, the example for health-related Skinny Vape could also be considered under the edgy or cool definition, and so this one would have 2 examples or 2 total themes. And then here are some examples of product labels from our cartoon, as well as food categories. And then when we discuss lookalike products, I've put up 3 photos of e-liquid samples. And when looking at each one, I would just ask our audience or anyone in attendance, are you reminded of a familiar product just by glancing at each one of these labels? So we acknowledge that lookalike products can be subjective. So what I see as a familiar product, someone else may not. To strengthen our study procedures and to limit subjectivity, the team has generated a strict process to input the product labels into Google image search to help provide more objective findings. And so as we talked a little bit, perhaps something did come to mind that seemed familiar. And regardless of what it is, and if it's the same thing as maybe I would have thought, if you were reminded of something that was familiar, there is definite cause for concern. And just a nice brain break before we move into our flavor wheel analysis. So how did we get here? The 2019 study included a brief evaluation of products with flavoring claims. So generally looking at things that claimed alcohol flavoring, mint, fruit, or candy, and they evaluated that broadly based on shop type. So to explore that a little bit further, we found an article. So a researcher from the Netherlands, Dr. Erna Kruseman and her colleagues in 2018 conducted a comprehensive literature review of e-liquid flavors. They identified 43 flavor categories and used these to generate their flavor wheel, which you see here on the screen. The flavor wheel, much like those used in the food and alcohol industry, is intended to be used to classify e-liquids based on marketing themes, so looking at the name of the product. What you see on the inner wheel, so that consists of 13 primary or main categories, and the outer wheel consists of 90 subcategories. And so in order to use this wheel, based on the flavor name, you would first identify the primary flavor from the inner wheel. And if there was an enhancer or further descriptor of that primary flavor, then you would follow that color and then choose one from the outer wheel. If there were any additional flavors, they could be classified as secondary flavor, so the outer wheel only if there were additional. So applying Kruseman's flavor wheel consistently may help create a shared vocabulary and illustrate the need for policy and regulation of these e-liquid flavors. And so for our methods, I'll give you an example showing how we applied the flavor wheel to our samples. So the photo you see here is a product called Blackberry Lemonade. And so using Kruseman's method, the primary flavor would fit in with the other beverages with the enhancer, so chosen from the outer wheel of lemonade. And then because there is an enhancer to that, a secondary flavor, so blackberry was chosen from the outer wheel only. So that's how we applied it to our samples. So a brief overview of these preliminary findings. We evaluated 253 original product names. There were some duplicate names purchased in the original sample of 285. Part of this analysis includes assessing products that have a unique name. So for example, Battlestar, Cheetah Stripes, or Don't Care Bear. Other planned analyses include assessing for the number of primary and secondary flavors identified. So some products had multiple primary and/or multiple secondary flavors. So the initial example I showed was pretty straightforward when applying the flavor wheel. Blackberry was the secondary, lemonade was the primary. It quickly became evident to the members of the research team that it would be difficult to apply some samples to the flavor wheel categories. So based on a name and label alone, it is difficult to identify potential primary or secondary flavors. We often had to refer to the product label to look for clues regarding what the potential flavor profile could be. So I'm going to show you some examples of those. So the first one we see is called Pink Parfait. So looking at the word Pink Parfait, I do not know how to classify that with the primary or secondary category, but by looking at the label, there may be clues. So this appears to have watermelon, lime, perhaps an orange, and a grapefruit. And so can't really tell if there's secondary flavors. So all four of those would technically be considered primary. The second sample is called Illuminati, and again, would have no idea what flavor profile that could be. So by looking at the label, we see there could be hints of pineapple, strawberry, and orange in this product. And lastly, this one is called Kizzle Sauce, and again, would have no idea how to classify that on name alone. So by looking at the label, where the arrow is pointing, you see the descriptor is coffee, sugar cookie, and cream. So we definitely encountered some unique challenges when trying to apply our samples to the flavor wheel, but I think we've got some really interesting findings that will be wonderful to share once our analysis has been completed. And now I will turn it back over to Kelly to present on our chemical analysis.
Thank you, Kolby. Next is chemical analysis. And next slide, please. Is how did we get here? Previously, we reported on the nicotine ingredient in the e-liquids, but there, as I alluded to, many other ingredients. And so that is what we are looking at now. Next slide. A little bit about the methods to determine these ingredients it's very technical, I guess. The samples were analyzed using GCMS and the accompanying software. Ingredient peaks of the samples were identified using NIST standard library and a search program. Information about each ingredient was collected using the databases listed there, PubChem, Human Metabolome Database, and then FEMA, which is not the Federal Emergency Management Agency, but is the Flavor Extract Manufacturers Association. And then statistical analysis was used with a couple of different packages. Next slide. So some preliminary findings, although this figure is too small to be really meaningful to you, what it does illustrate is the number of ingredients that were found. From the 109 samples that we sent for chemical analysis, 48 different individual ingredients were identified. If you're wondering about the tallest bar, that's what always draws my attention. The tallest peach color bar is nicotine, which simply makes sense, right, as something that is within these e-liquids. The next bars are all chemical names that might cause you a little bit to glaze over. I know it does me, and so we will not state all of these, but they will be included in our publication. Next slide. This table shows you the mean or the average number of ingredients present in any one of the samples that was, the minimum ingredient then of all samples. The smallest number of ingredients was about 11, with the minimum being 3 and the maximum being 22 ingredients in any one sample. What are those 22 ingredients is what is the focus of this chemical analysis. If you look at the second gray bar where it says e-liquid type and looking at the 3 types of e-liquids that we purchased, you can see that the average number of ingredients present in the salt samples was about 15. This was significantly higher number of ingredients than was in the free base samples or the nicotine-free samples. Why are there so many ingredients in the nicotine salts? This is also something that we are determining. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. This shows results. We decided to take the concept of Kruseman's flavor wheel and develop an ingredient wheel. So this new application of Kruseman's wheel shows our 109 samples. The inner wheel contains the flavor categories of our samples based on that FEMA identification. Near the top of the wheel in blue, but the inner circle, you can see the word candy. Going around the wheel, you can see then fruit, floral, herbal, dessert, and other ingredients, and of course, nicotine. The middle level is the chemical functional group, which includes esters, aldehydes, alcohol, nitrogen containing compounds, glycol, glycerol, and other sugar compounds, acids, benzoids, and terpenoids. Most of these chemicals actually have even longer formal chemical names, but we are not including them on the slide at this point in time. The outer wheel ends up being what I think is sort of the most exciting, and this is the exact flavor profile as described by FEMA. Again, if you look near the top of the inner wheel in the yellow portion of the wheel, and you can see the word fruit. So still looking at fruit, but moving to the middle level for fruit is lactone. Lactone has two flavor profiles indicated on the outer wheel. Now we are working to make this wheel, this is a draft as you can see, and we need to make sure that the wheel is more legible and that these terms are all included. And so we will be working on that. But the interesting thing then with lactone has the two flavor profiles. The first flavor profile is shown, starts with the word tropical. It goes on to say tropical peach, coconut, apricot, milk, all comes from lactone. The second flavor profile of lactone says just simply apricot. So again, these came from a FEMA database. And so we are trying to standardize what we are seeing within the e-liquids against what the different flavoring FEMA database says is possible. And again, we're working to make this more legible. And we will also be presenting this table within a table, but we really like this wheel concept. Dr. Gonowitz, our colleague who is highly published in the e-liquid ingredients world, has stated that the application of this wheel is really novel or original in the literature and therefore will be very valuable for others working in this field. We are working with Dr. Gonowitz to include in our analysis the potential harmfulness of all of these ingredients. So that also will be forthcoming for you. We have more data to include and share with you, but it's quite technical, and we're working to make the language pretty useful and understandable for the public health community. So as you know, the effects of e-cigarettes on human health is not totally understood as yet, but studies and analysis such as these offer insight towards a better understanding of the implications that these products may have on the people who use them. Next slide. And I'll hand it back to Kolby.
All right, so just to provide a brief summary, today we presented a brief review of the 2019 North Dakota study that included an assessment of 35 shops. We briefly reviewed what an e-liquid is and shared about the 4 analyses in progress. 285 e-liquid samples are evaluated for our general label analysis, the thematic analysis, which includes an evaluation of lookalike products, as well as the flavor wheel application. 109 samples are included in the chemical analysis. We found 48 individual ingredients in the sample. The number of ingredients in any one sample ranged from 3 to 22, and we are currently developing a novel ingredient wheel. And so next are just a few references slides. And I'd now like to open it up for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly and Kolby. I don't see anything that's coming through. No, nothing yet. And if something does come in, we will certainly let you know and pass those along to you. And if you hang on to the call and something comes in and want to answer, we certainly can pass that along to you at that point too. But thank you again, Kelly and Kolby. Much appreciated.